Hey there, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're really digging into the nuts and bolts of scaling a business in the short run. If you've ever wondered how a company mathematically figures out the exact right number of people to hire to optimize their workforce, well, you're in the right place. Let's dive right in. Picture this. You run a brewery, right? And boom, out of nowhere, market demand for your beer just skyrockets over the weekend. Can you just snap your fingers and magic a brand new factory out of thin air by Monday? No way. The reality is you're constrained, and this limitation sets up our central problem today perfectly. You want to produce more, but certain elements of your business literally cannot be expanded at a moment's notice. So, here's our roadmap for today. We'll quickly hit the basics of production, how we measure your product, the law of diminishing returns, the 3 stages of production, and finally, we'll wrap up with economic costs. Starting off with number 1, the basics of production, how we transform inputs. At its core, production is just the process of taking inputs and turning them into something valuable. But a massive constraint we have to deal with here is what economists call the short run. Now, the short run isn't just some arbitrary number of days or months that applies to everyone. Instead, it's a specific period of time where the quantity of at least one of your inputs remains absolutely fixed. For a tech startup, maybe they can change all their inputs in a month. For an auto manufacturer, it might take a couple of years. But as long as you're stuck with at least one unchangeable input, you, my friend, are operating in the short run. To really get how scaling works during this tricky period, we've got to contrast the 2 types of inputs a business uses. On one side, you've got fixed inputs. These are things you just cannot easily manipulate when the market demands an immediate pivot. We're talking physical buildings, land, heavy machinery. On the flip side, we have variable inputs. These are things you can alter almost instantaneously to pump up your output. The absolute classic example here is unskilled labor. So in the short run, if a firm wants to increase output, they really only have one option: aggressively pull the lever on those variable inputs. They have to hire or fire workers. All right, let's roll right into number 2, measuring your product and tracking your output success. If throwing more people at the problem is our only immediate option, we need to know exactly how to measure their actual contribution. When you map out total product, there's a fascinating trend. Initially, as you add more workers, your output shoots up at an increasing rate. You're cruising. But as you keep adding people, that growth slows down. It increases, but at a decreasing rate. Eventually, you hit an absolute maximum peak. And if you keep cramming workers in after that, your total output actually falls. It goes backward. To figure out exactly why this happens, we track 2 vital signs: marginal product, which is the extra output you get by adding just one more worker, and average product, which is the mean contribution of each person on the floor. Let's bring this down to earth with a hypothetical cut flower business. Let's say their capital, represented by K, is totally fixed at 5 units. Labor, represented by L, is our variable input. The pressing question for this business owner is exactly how many workers do we need to maximize our total output without accidentally tipping ourselves over that peak? So, mathematically speaking, the peak of total product is reached at the exact second marginal product drops to 0. Think about it. If the very next worker you hire adds literally 0 extra flowers to your daily total, you've hit your ceiling. For our cut flower firm, crunching the numbers reveals that this magic maximum capacity number is exactly 100 workers. And this perfectly illustrates how inputs create a literal ceiling for a business. By taking those 100 workers and combining them with the 5 fixed units of capital, the absolute maximum achievable output for this firm is exactly 985 flowers. Hiring worker number 101 wouldn't just give you 0 extra flowers, it would actually mess up the workflow and cause total production to drop. Moving into part 3, the law of diminishing returns, the absolute limits of scaling. Economists officially call this the law of variable proportions. It simply means that as you add successive units of a variable input, like our workers, to a fixed input, like our equipment, the extra marginal product from each new unit is eventually going to decline. Now, here is a super important caveat. Actually, scratch that. Let's call it a common misconception. This counterintuitive drop in productivity doesn't happen because your new hires are lazier or less skilled. Assuming all your labor is exactly equal, marginal product diminishes simply because the factory floor gets way too crowded relative to the machinery available. It's essentially the economic version of too many cooks in the kitchen. Now, here is an absolute unbreakable rule in economics. When the average product of labor hits its absolute maximum peak, it perfectly equals the marginal product of labor. This is a mathematical tipping point. Before this point, each new worker you bring on adds more than the current average, which pulls the whole average up. But after this intersection, each new worker brings in less than the average, which drags the whole average down. It's that simple. Okay, let's tackle part 4, the 3 stages of production. Where should your business actually operate? Knowing that exact mathematical tipping point lets us chop the short-run production cycle into a really handy 3-stage diagnostic checklist. In stage I, your average product is increasing, but you're actually underutilizing your fixed inputs. You just don't have enough workers to run the machinery at full tilt. Then we hit stage 2. This is the efficient region, where marginal product is diminishing, sure, but it's still positive. Finally, there's stage 3, where marginal product actually goes negative because your fixed inputs are severely overutilized and people are practically tripping over each other. Stage 2 is the sweet spot. It sits perfectly right between 2 extremes. It kicks off right at the peak of the average product curve, that exact intersection we just talked about where average equals marginal product, and it ends exactly at the moment the marginal product curve plummets below 0. So here's the big takeaway, the real punchline. Stage 2 is the Goldilocks zone for absolutely any business. The efficient region of production is where the marginal product of your variable input is declining, but it is still adding positive value. A rational business owner will aggressively push past stage 1 to fully utilize their capital, but they're going to hit the brakes and absolutely stop hiring before dipping into stage 3's negative returns. And finally, part 5, understanding economic costs, accounting versus economics. Because at the end of the day, all these physical choices on the factory floor translate into cold, hard cash, and you need to know exactly how those costs are calculated. To an accountant, profit is pretty straightforward math, total revenue minus explicit out-of-pocket costs. But an economist is a bit more cynical. Well, maybe holistic is a better word. They factor in implicit costs too, like the opportunity cost of what else you could be doing with your valuable time and capital. An economist looks at this entire picture when deciding if pushing further into stage 2 is actually worth the money. So what does this all mean for you? Well, I want you to look at your own operations and ask yourself this. Are you truly maximizing your workforce's output by operating super efficiently in stage 2? Or are you just mindlessly overcrowding your fixed inputs, slipping into stage 3, and dragging down your true economic profit? Understanding this short-run theory gives you the exact framework you need to know where you stand. Thanks so much for hanging out with me on this explainer. I really hope this was helpful.